in the beginning. Yep. We have a table, so yeah. All right, we ready? Brandon? Okay. All right. Here, can we bunch up so they can see you? Oh, sure. Just do that. Can you tell I was on your book? Okay.
Do you want me to get the speaker? I can scoot.
Okay. We good? All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm State Representative Afton Bain, and I'm joined here with Senator Heidi Campbell, Chairman John Ray Clemens, and multiple organizations that have a stake in this fight: NAACP, Ironworkers Local 492, the AFL-CIO, the Central Labor Council of Nashville, and the Tennessee Disability Coalition. Why we're gathered here today is there is a bill making its way through the legislature that aims to dissolve the Tennessee Human Rights Commission by moving it to the Attorney General and allowing him full jurisdiction to fire staff, to stop current complaints that are in process. And what this really speaks to is independent institutions are the firewall between people and government. The Tennessee Human Rights Commission has operated outside of partisan influence for over 60 years. That's by design. Independent commissions ensure that people, especially those without wealth and or political connections, can challenge injustice on a level playing field. When the firewall is removed, power becomes less accessible, less fair, and more dangerous. And as we know with our unelected activist Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, who is actively undermining civil rights, that this is not a match that is made in heaven, and that we are gathered with organizations today that would be personally and organizationally affected by this move. So with that, I would like to introduce Senator Heidi Campbell.
Hey there, thanks so much for being here today, all of you. And you, this is, a really alarming thing. We get lost in the deluge of insanity that goes on down here, and sometimes things can just slip by. This is one of the biggest things that is going on right now, and we really need to give it the attention that it deserves. I mean, giving the Civil Rights Commission to the Attorney General is close to giving oversight of the hen house to the fox as you could ever find, especially with this activist Attorney General who's appointed and is obviously very political and has shown that he is interested in undermining civil rights, is actively opposed to diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and is trying very hard to eradicate any attempts to protect civil rights in our state. So it could not be more important that people out in this state know that the Civil Rights Commission is actually being disbanded, and through this legislation would fall under the aegis of the Attorney General, because that would be a huge, huge mistake. So I will pass it on to...
And so we have Cassandra Farmer with the Tennessee Disability Coalition.
Great. Do we need to move the mics? Okay.
Brandon, is that your...
Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Cassandra Farmer, and I'm a proud, lifelong Tennessean. I've lived with a disability since 1982 and know firsthand about the injustice, discrimination, and barriers faced in Tennessee by Tennesseans with disabilities across our great state. I'm here today to speak about a bill that's going through Tennessee legislature that should make us all stop and pause. I want you just to think for a second if you were in my shoes. What if you wanted to rent an apartment, but the landlord wouldn't rent to you simply because you used a wheelchair? The bill I'm referring to, HB 901, SB 861, would dismantle the Tennessee Human Rights Commission, a 60-year-old, nonpartisan, and independent state enforcement agency whose only charge is protecting Tennesseans from the discrimination in their pursuits for employment, housing, and other basic needs. It's important to remember that independent, nonpartisan makeup of the Human Rights Commission is a direct reflection of the very same Tennesseans that it serves to protect. We, like the Commission, are fiercely independent, and we are anything but partisan. The disability community of Tennessee are members of every political stripe, race, creed, religion, you name it. We are our community. We are all of you. Disability is not a partisan issue, and disability does not discriminate. And shockingly, the disability community is the only minority group that any of you could join at any time. I just got a bit of a head start. Some of us were born with a disability, and others acquire it through illness or injury, and the luckiest among us will experience it as a part of the aging process. But regardless of how we got our disability, most of us will experience discrimination in one form or another. And look, you might not hear a lot of members of our community speak out as often. Like everybody else, we're busy people with jobs and lives and a million demands on our time. But there's one other thing about living with a disability. We don't have the privilege of staying silent. We don't have the privilege of thinking, it'll never happen to me. I'll never have that problem, because it already has. And if disability happens to you, you may need the Tennessee Human Rights Commission for a couple of reasons. Right now, like has already been mentioned, there are well over 1,000 complaints in process with the Tennessee Human Rights Commission. The part that you don't know is that the majority of those complaints are related to disability discrimination. Moreover, the commission, as it exists right now, comes with deep federal resources to investigate complaints. Those resources give justice to those who have been treated unfairly simply because of their disability. For example, if a landlord owns multiple properties and is discriminating against folks like me in Kentucky and Ohio, I can file a complaint here in Tennessee. The feds can see those complaints and stop it across all 3 states. The Tennessee Attorney General simply doesn't have the same access to those resources or the same reach, and they never will. Only the Trump administration could do that. And under this bill, currently being considered in the Tennessee General Assembly, the Tennessee Attorney General would toss out every single complaint the Tennessee Human Rights Commission is currently managing under his partisan office. Right now, more than 1,000 claims are being reviewed, and this bill would throw them out entirely. It would throw out the complaints of 1,000 people who are looking for justice. People of all political stripe who have faced discrimination in their pursuit of a job or a place to live. And due to the statute of limitations, some or a combination of both of these folks might not see justice at all if the bill comes into law. Furthermore, many claims underway may be approaching the 180-day deadline to file a discrimination complaint, and there won't be another chance for them. Maintaining an independent, nonpartisan agency is not only critical to fairness and oversight, it's critical to democracy and to our pursuit of an American dream. Oh, and when your time comes to join our community, it'll be a part of your pursuit of the American dream too. And don't worry, I promise our community will welcome you.
And we'll pause. Are there any questions for Cassandra?
So are there any examples that you can share right now of anybody that you work with that are worried about maybe their lawsuit being filed or having to refile it? Because I think there was something that said that 1,000 lawsuits are going to be in question. Do you have any information on that specifically?
I don't have a specific case that I can speak to. I don't want to disclose anybody's personal information. But I know that our community as a whole is concerned about this, and we're concerned about people not getting, their claims filed timely because of everything that's going on, and not getting truly the look at the potential discrimination that we all know exists, right?
And I know that obviously there are so many resources with how it's going now, and you did specify that there's a lack of that, and there might be, I believe in the release, if you didn't specify, this possibility for preconceived notions going into it, that it might be just with a smaller organization handling all of it. Can you give any examples of what that might be, whether it's that they don't understand the complexities of a certain case, or like where exactly you want to pinpoint the concern with certain things?
I think, the huge concern, right, is that if this is no longer a bipartisan committee whose only goal is to look at these cases, then we are losing the scope of Tennesseans in general, because we do not fit into independent boxes. And so if we narrow it down to something that is no longer bipartisan and no longer simply looking at the cases but is part of a larger organization, then do we lose our ability to be timely, to be fully considerate of all Tennesseans?
And do you have any examples of it? Because I know this talks about race too, talks about other things as well as obviously people that do have, a disability at work or where else it might be. And I'm just trying to pinpoint something here for the people to understand. I think a lot of times when we explain things with examples, we can really pinpoint how this is impacting a big number of people, or even that one person that isn't being heard. So I know that you said you don't want to get into somebody else's story, but could you possibly share an example here to make it full circle?
Yeah, so for example, if somebody is, needing reasonable accommodations for employment, reasonable accommodations can look like a lot of things, right? So if what is a reasonable accommodation for me or another individual due to their disability is not a reasonable accommodation to an employer, then there's a potential that they could be denied either that accommodation or denied employment outright. There are a lot of reasons that people don't disclose things like disability on job applications or housing applications. A lot of it is that stigma that we know exists in the world. Some of us don't get that luxury. My disability is very visible. You can see it. I don't get to hide that or not disclose that. If I roll into a job interview, or I roll into a housing office, my disability comes with me at the forefront. While that's not the case for everybody, we know that those discriminations happen. And they happen for a large number of people.
Okay, so it's really here then what I'm hearing is that you want to make sure that it stays timely. You want to make sure that there's enough people on staff to have the expertise and the experience of the different types of lawsuits that might come from all the different examples that you shared. Is there anything else that you're worried about besides those resources, or anything you really want to make sure that I help share in my story tonight?
Yeah, I think, again, the reason that we talk about it being a nonpartisan and independent organization is because that is the only way that we can be an example of all Tennesseans. And as I mentioned, disability doesn't have a particular subset or a particular community that it affects. It affects all of us. So it's so important that it stays independent, it stays bipartisan, so that it can be reflective of all Tennesseans.
And I know that your name was said, but do you mind spelling it for us so we get that correct?
Yeah, it's a difficult name to say and it's a difficult name to spell, so I'm happy to spell it. It's very unusual. It's Kasondra, Cassandra.
And the last name?
Farmer, F-A-R-M-E-R.
That's a little easier. That's a little easier. Thank you very much.
Cassandra, do you feel at times that you're going to go into a business or a place and there's not going to be people like you in any workplace? If this passes or something?
Yeah, I think that could unfortunately be a very real possibility. We know that those discriminations already exist. So if there aren't organizations like this to help us combat that, how likely is it that people may be pushed out of the workplace or simply not hired to begin with?
How many employees does the Human Rights Commission have? Do you know, does
Is this
anybody
John
know?
Ray or AJ?
30.
Yeah, I know they've cut back some. I would say they probably got about 20, 25.
Just over 30.
30, okay.
I can answer more legal-oriented and specific details after telling.
So for the
Well done.
sake of
I'd be interested in hearing your take on, between what the HRC does now and what might happen under Scrimeti for legally how it is.
Yeah, I'll answer that after the other speakers.
So for the sake of time, we have labor leaders here. We also have AJ Starling, who was a former, was on the commission, so he can answer questions at some point. And then also Timothy Hughes, who's a representative of NAACP, so they can be here for questions. But for the sake of time, I'm going to call up Vonda McDaniel with the Central Labor Council.
Thank you. So for me, this is about what the work of the Tennessee Human Rights Commission is on a local level and what they do all across the state in communities all across the state. There was a question about, like, what do these stories look like? Well, a working mom looking for housing in Chattanooga but is being denied an apartment because she has 2 young children. Or a recent graduate with a disability in Kingsport trying to get accommodations at their first job. Or a refugee family trying to enjoy a meal at a restaurant that refuses to serve them. An older adult, which I find myself in more and more, with decades of experience being pushed out or denied a position because of their age. A small black family in Nashville facing differential treatment from a WIC office because of their race. Our friends, family, neighbors, co-workers who may face discrimination in Tennessee based on age, sex, religion, disability, or national origin. All of these things. And when Tennesseans face unequal treatment because of their race, sex, disability, or national origin, they need a safe, supportive environment to be able to receive the trained representation that they deserve.
And next we'll have Justin Humbles with Ironworkers Local 492.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Humbles, and I am a member of Union Ironworkers Local 492 based in Nashville, Tennessee. As a member of labor, I can tell you that our history and that of suffrage and of civil rights movement are deeply intertwined. The fight for working class survival began well over 100 years ago. This very working class found themselves underpaid and overworked without any form of benefits. Prejudice and hate were commonplace. Basic non-discriminatory human rights were often intentionally ignored, both inside and out of the workplace. Working conditions were frequently abysmal, with very little precaution or provision for safety. Without any workforce development measures, workers found themselves without the proper training to advance in their roles or enrich lives with a true career versus a job. Any complaints or criticism often led to retaliation in the form of termination or in some cases worse. All of these created a quality of life disparity and vicious cycle that left workers and their families without hope for a more prosperous future. There was no recourse available for the worker and no one to advocate on their behalf. In an effort to secure basic human rights, better conditions on and off the job, and a fair wage and benefit for our families, our movements work together to increase public awareness and secure much of what we as the working class know today as our labor standards. Some examples of what our movements fought together for include prohibiting employer and age discrimination, the 40-hour work week, making overtime possible, affordable availability to health insurance through the employer, Equal Pay Acts, 1963 and 2011, OSHA, workman's compensation for men and women to go home safe every night to their families, child labor laws, give our children a fair chance at life, live long and healthy, minimum wage, and Social Security. These hard-earned advancements were achieved solely through blood, sweat, and many sacrifices by the working class and rely heavily on public institutions such as the Tennessee Human Rights Commission, OSHA, and others to continue safeguarding our rights. As working-class Tennesseans, we should be gravely concerned by HB 910, SB 861. We currently have a nonpartisan, independent body that processes and investigates discrimination claims on our behalf. I see any attempt to abolish the THRC as the erosion of our right to an independent commission that delivers a fair perspective of each situation. Additionally, should the Tennessee Human Rights Commission be abolished, what is to prevent further attacks on other institutions that safeguard our hard-earned rights, working conditions, safety standards, etc.? Tennessee, it's time to stand together. We must tell our legislators that we're not going to stand back and let our rights and institutions be dismantled. In closing, the day before his assassination on April 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told a group of striking sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee, we've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point in Memphis. We've got to see it through. Thank you.
All right, and with that, we also have Chairman Clemens, who's on Gov Ops, which is where the bill was heard last. So if you have granular questions, he can answer those.
So can you talk to us about how things are run now and how they might be run differently in the future if it is the Attorney General that's taking charge?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that and to follow up on her statements. Right now, you have an entity that's underfunded, and it is facing challenges because it has purposefully been limited with resources and funds to be able to process claims in a timely manner, and they're trying to use that as the impetus to push this national agenda to concentrate all this power into one partisan-controlled office. So what would happen, or what could happen here is, once you transfer this over, you're going to have partisan political decisions rather than human rights decisions. And so whereas right now you have an independent body free of any partisanship, free of any other motive other than ensuring equality, and housing, workplace are free of discrimination, you could have somebody choosing what constitutes discrimination. What actually is a disability? Does something qualify as a workplace accommodation or a reasonable accommodation? When you have somebody who's strictly partisan deciding what's reasonable in terms of an accommodation for a disabled individual, you get into really problematic territory, and it's dangerous. And then someone who's in charge of running those things who has shown no regard for the health and safety of Tennesseans, for innocent children, who now is joining up with the partisan efforts. They challenged, he filed a frivolous lawsuit to throw out a presidential election that was summarily dismissed. He recently has jumped on the bandwagon with birthright citizenship. When that type of person who has such little disregard for human rights, and those among us who require the protections of the law that Title VI affords, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, when you have somebody like that, of that ilk, making these types of decisions, I think we're in real trouble, because they're less interested in protecting Tennesseans than they are carrying out some political agenda.
And what's the staff look like now, and what do you think could be the possibility of the staff? I'm sure it will be smaller.
Well, no, what you're going to have is we've increased the size of the Attorney General's office exponentially over the past few years. We've increased his funding substantially. And so what happens now when you take this over, this bill as amended expressly provides the Attorney General the discretion to determine how and whether to utilize these positions and to employ such personnel as may be necessary and appropriate for the division to accomplish its stated purposes. So basically what you're giving the Attorney General to do is the complete authority to terminate everyone who's currently in this office and replace them with his preferred attorneys or other staff members who are going to carry out his ideological agenda.
So it's not really how many, it's really who, and are they capable to make these decisions with the background or whatever that they need to decide?
Yeah, they're empowering a purely political attorney general who's making political decisions rather than legal decisions recently or throughout his entire tenure, the opportunity to completely structure this office with whomever he wants who's going to carry out his agenda. That's really dangerous. And you remove all that institutional knowledge, you remove all that educational experience, and then you replace it with people who are more like political henchmen, potentially with law degrees, rather than people who've been doing the job and know how to do the job well, but have been underfunded for years.
And with less transparency.
And with less transparency.
And does that solve the problem that they're posing, which is that there aren't enough staff members and this isn't being seen in a you know how sometimes people have a solution for a problem and then they're giving you those examples? It sounds like from what you're saying, it's just